Well, Kutov, today's daf is Daf Nun Aleph in K'subas, as we learned from Hushleim, for Yosef Israel ben Chaim Michal and Elazar ben Reuma. Says the Gemara from the top of the page, the second line. We were just discussing the concept of a woman who's widowed or divorced. Her ksuba is drabanan, and the rabbis were talking on this. She get the money that he has to give her, but also we discussed the concept of mazonos that her and her daughters get. All that's part of the Tanai Ksuba, but the Tanai Ksuba can only be fulfilled from landed property, from real estate, from what we call nechasim mishubarim, things which have a mortgage on them, not movable. So the Gemara here discusses some exceptions to that. Here's an exception. There was an orphan, and then his sister came before Rava. Their assets had been held by a guardian. Amar Rava says, give him enough for the girl also. In other words, the child, the son, is entitled to get the Yerusha. He gets everything, not just real estate, but even movables. But he said, give him enough food and money for the girl also. We say later on, Rava is going to say that the girls only get maintenance, sustenance, food, etc., food and clothing from karka, not from a talflin. And here you're giving it even from cash. Whether it's for food, whether it's for fulfillment of the ksuba, that means to say giving the wife her money that she is due from the husband, or for a dowry, whatever she's entailed to based on the ksuba. Again, not a doraisa. Doraisa only if there's sons, the sons get, and the daughters don't get. If there's only daughters, then the daughters get. But the doraisa, they get everything, whatever assets the man owns, whether it's real estate or movables. The sons get everything, whatever it goes to Yerusha. But based on Tanai Ksuba, it's only based on karka. So how can you give the girls here too? Amalahu. So he answered him. Rava answered, I'm giving when I'm supplying for the daughter over here, even though you're saying I'm supplying it from cash, I'm only giving the daughter because she's serving the son. In other words, who's making breakfast for him? Who's taking care of him? It's the girls. If he wanted a shifcha, wouldn't you give him that too? If he wanted somebody, after all, the sons are entitled to get everything based on Yerusha, except he's a child. So the guardian is taking care of the apotropos, is taking care of his money. But you give the kid whatever he needs. Here he needs his sister also to help serve him, clean the house or whatever she does in the house, mend the garments, etc. Here you have two things. She serves him and she's also a sister. So therefore, Rava defended his case. Still, we see Tana Rabbanim. Rebbe held no, that for sustenance for a wife, that means part of the Tanai Ksuba, or for the daughters, Rebbe says you paid even from cash, whether it's a chasam sheish l'chrais, meaning that's real estate, basically stuff that can be mortgaged, or nechasam sheish l'chrais. That's what Rebbe says. Rav Shimon says no. Nechasam sheish l'chrais, if it's real estate like mortgage property, motzin lebanos min abanim. You take from, if it's land property, you take for banos min abanim, meaning the sons who get the inheritance. Still, from the inheritance, you still have to allot money for food. For the wife and the daughters, from the assets from the estate. If it's landed property, let's say there's only daughters. Who gets the Yerusha then? If a man only leaves daughters, the daughters get it. So let's say the older daughters took possession of it, and there's young girls there who don't have it, so you take from them too. In other words, the girls should get equally, says Rashi. The Talmud goes, and the older ones took it, you divide it equally. If a man left 6 daughters and he left $6,000, his whole estate was $6,000, they each get $1,000. If the older girls took possession of it, you still take away from them. Well, the same thing if it was all boys. If it was all boys, even the young boys get the same Yerusha as the older boys. It doesn't go by, if you're bar mitzvah, you get more money. If you're not bar mitzvah, you get less, all the same. If the daughters, right? The daughters, let's say they were young Labanos min Abanos min Achasim Reuben. Let's say, even though the halach is that the sons get the Yerusha and the daughters only get sustenance, maintenance, etc., clothing and a dowry, that's only if there's enough of the assets to feed the girls plus give their boys their Yerusha. But if there's, like in this case, where there's a chasim merubin, there's enough in the estate for the sons to get the Yerusha and still enough to supply the girls. Let's say there's not a lot of money. Let's say the man left a very small estate. And if the boys take the Yerusha, there won't be enough money to keep the girls maintained until they are bogros, until they get married or until they turn 12 and a half. Then the rabbi said that give it to the girls and let the boys go begging. That was part of their Tanai also. Even though the boys, Menator, are entitled to the Yerusha, but that was what the rabbi said. That's all by Nechasim Mishubadim. If the man left over real estate, Nechasim Sheish Lemachrayis, like real estate. Nechasim She'ein Lemachrayis, but if it's movables, things that are not usually mortgaged, Motzin Lebanim and Abanim, Lebanos and Abanos. For Yerusha, yes, if there's only boys, whatever there is. Remember, Yerusha, all the assets are involved, whatever the man left. So if there's older boys and younger boys, you make sure that it's equal. Same thing with Banos Menabanos, girls from girls. Ula Banim Menabanos. If the girls took possession, they were young boys, the boys get it because they're entitled to the Yerusha. The girls aren't. Avalola Banos Menabanim. But girls are not, in other words, if there's only cash, the girls don't get their estate, they don't get maintained from there. They only get maintained from real estate. That's what Shimon ben Elazar's opinion. And Afagav the Kaimla and Halachah Rebbe Mechavero, even though normally if it's a machlokes between Rebbe and one other, we paskin like Rebbe. And here Rebbe says, even in terms of cash, even if the father left only cash, the girls still get. Here we don't paskin. Halachah Reb Shimon Elazar. Rav himself said, Rav himself said that the halacha is that for the Tanai Ksuba, not for Yerusha, Tanai Ksuba is only from Karka, not from Talmud, whether it's for the Ksuba or for Mazon, the Ksuba itself, the $200, or Bein Mazon for sustenance, maintenance, for food, Bein Parnasa, or for the dowry. And even though Rav, we said before, made the exception by Yasam and Yasoma, and he said to the Apotropos, give him enough for the girl too, that was really because the girl was helping the boy. In other words, it's like a man said that you say the guardians have the Yorish's money. A man died, left a 5-year-old boy. And so the money's with the guardian. Well, the boy inherits everything, right? The guardian has to help him and give him food. Let's say he needs also a cook. So he says, supply the cook too. That's part of what it's part of his mazonos. Mazonos doesn't just mean pay the makolet bill. It means that whatever the kid needs for food. So we've said that the ksuba is a Tanai that the rabbi said that every man must give his wife a ksuba. There were locales that they didn't write the ksuba physically because they were afraid that there would be some hanky-panky, meaning if you would write the ksuba, who holds on to the ksuba? She does. So she can collect the ksuba later on upon death or divorce, right? So she would collect the ksuba from, if the husband died or divorced, she would collect the ksuba. But then the issue comes up, so what happens with the ksuba when she collects it? She has to give it to the man or to the estate, to the kids to hold on to make sure she doesn't collect again or rip it up, right? But you have to worry about it. So in many cases, there were locales, they didn't actually write it. But the basic idea is whether it's written or not, it's as if it's there. So low cost of ksuba, even if he didn't write a ksuba, psul gov masayim mana. Even if he didn't write it, the psul is entitled to minimum 200, and almanas and ba'ulam is entitled to. So when we say almana, we mean even a grusha, meaning a woman who's already been married. She's entitled to 200. Even if he didn't write it, it's a Tanai Ksuba. Nei shehu Tanai Bezin. Tanai Bezin, rabbi said, she's entitled to Ksuba. Kasala Sara Shavamana Tachtim Saim says, let's say he says, okay, I'm going to mortgage, you have this Ksuba, and in the Ksuba, I've said, I'm going to pay you the $200 if upon death or divorce, and I am mortgaging it, I'm guaranteeing it with a field that's only worth $100, not 200. That's not good. And he didn't write to her, all my assets, the Islay, all my assets, they are mortgaged to your ksuba. Now, the Rashash, others learned that it's olo kasava, because if he writes only, if he gives her a field that's worth 100 instead of the 200, that's certainly no good, right? Because it can't just be a field, any field. And Kasla Sarashava says that's not good. And then he says, Velo kasava kol mechasim. Even if he wrote a field that's worth 200 for the 200, he still has to write custom. Now he has to do both. If he gives if he mortgages it or guarantees it, let's say guarantees it with something that's worth less than 200, That's not good. And even if he guaranteed it was something which is worth 200, but it's not good enough, he has to guarantee all of it. Now, as the man says, I'm going to give you $200. And you know what? I have a field that's worth about 200, so that'll be your guarantee. No, that's not good enough. You have to guarantee with all your assets. Maybe you'll sell that field, or maybe it won't be around anymore, or something will happen to it. He has to, that's part of the Tanakh Ksubah. He has to write, all my assets are there to guarantee your Ksubah. This way, that's one of the time bezin. Again, Ksubah basically is drabanan. And even if you learn that it's a doraisa, it's based on a doraisa of 200, but all these tanam is certainly not written, not part of what's written. The Torah doesn't write these things down. It's not written in the Torah that he has to guarantee with all his assets. That the rabbi said. Another condition of the ksubah is lo kasav, like one of the conditions of the ksubah is we said that he has to, if she's taken into captivity, he guarantees that he'll redeem her, whatever the cost. So lo kasav, let's say he didn't write in the ksubah, im tishtaboy, if you're taken into captivity by the goyim, I will redeem you, basminach le'insan, I will return you to my wife, to be my wife. It's considered anyway as if it's written in there because it's a Tanai Bezin. Or let's say with kahanas. Kahanas means if he's a Kohen. If he's a Kohen and she's taken into captivity and violated, what's the halacha? Can't take her back, right? So in that case, with kahanas, so does he still have to redeem her? He can't say, I'm going to take you back. I will return you to your country, meaning I'll return you to your family. He can't take her back anymore, but he has to still redeem her. Chayiv, he's still chayiv shoot tonight best. All these things are absolute requirements that he must do. Okay. Nishbis, let's say she was taken into captivity, chayiv leftosa. He has to be quoted no matter what. Imam hare gita, let's say he says, here's her get, ksubasa, the tiftas atzma. Let's say he says, listen, I'm going to redeem her. They want 50,000 to get her out. The ksubah is only about 200, right? Here's the ksubah, I'm divorcing you. Work it out yourself, right? And she herself, ain't no she's not allowed to do that. We'll explain in a minute why. I mean, obviously she's not in a good condition, but what's the legal reason why? The legal reason why is because in return for being po to her, he's entitled to eat her nichsei malug. Well, you know, he's been eating her nichsei malug. He's never redeemed her. He has an obligation to redeem her because he's been eating her nichsei malug. Let's say though, the next case, so let's say she got sick. Chayav lefrosi, he has to heal her, pay for her medical bills. That's part of food. Just like he has to feed her, like he's a food. Amar Regita Uksubasa, let's say he says, okay, here's your get, here's your ksuba, tir pras atzma, let her heal herself. We're sure he's allowed to do that. Why? Because here that's part of the food. What is the food? The food is keneged. Why does he have to feed her? Because he gets her paycheck. We discussed that before. Remember, food is regular, paycheck is regular. So the rabbi said, you can keep her paycheck, but you have to feed her. Okay, well, he's been feeding her until now. He's been taking her paycheck and feeding her until now. Now she's sick in bed, there's no longer a paycheck. But he has, so he could say, look, there's no more paycheck and I'm not going to feed you anymore. The healing is part of it. Refuah, is part of it. So the Mefarshim deal with several things over here. Well, first of all, Tosas says, in explaining this, Tosas says that, look, the refuah is part of the mazonos, right? Giving her medicine as part of food. But Reikibla can I get Masiyadesh at Achshav? She already got food until now for her paycheck. Now there's no more paycheck. He says, listen, there's no more paycheck coming in. I don't want to feed you anymore. I'm going to divorce you. Take your ksubah and work it out yourself. But he can't say, listen, take your get and get your and redeem you if she was taken into captivity, because she never got, till now she's been giving him payrolls from her nichsei malug, and he didn't give her anything for that. He owes her the obligation to redeem her. So of course the Rambam says that even though he's allowed to, if she's sick, he's allowed to say, okay, I'm divorcing you, here's your ksubah, heal yourself, pay your own doctor bills, get your own Blue Cross medical, whatever they call it, take care of it yourself, your own kupat refuah, whatever. He's allowed to, however, Rambam says that's not their cheretz. You don't leave a sick wife and give her get and say, you're on your own. Not only that, the Ravid says a bigger thing. He says by Eishes Yifas Torah, it says Vishil Achta, right? Send her home, right? If she has, so if she wants to Vishil Achta, send her home. You send her home if she can walk, if she can go home. But if somebody's in bed, if she's sick in bed, you're not allowed to. Malach by a shiksi, you can't do that. Certainly by a Jewish girl. So it says even though this case is only if she's not that sick, she just needs some medical bills. Fine, then you're allowed to, even though it's frowned upon. The rabbis frowned upon doing that. But if she's be laid up in bed and can't move, can't get out of bed, then you're not allowed to. So here's the issue about if she's taken into captivity. The Mishnah says clearly you can't say, here's your get, here's your ksuba, and you're on your own. Redeem yourself. He has an obligation to redeem her no matter what the cost is, as long as he can do it. Who does our Mishnah go like? There's a famous machlok between Rav Meir and Rav Yehuda. Is she allowed to be mochel her ksuba? Let's she says, you don't have to pay me. I'm so happy to get married. You don't have to pay me the ksuba. Is she allowed to do that? So the Chara Mishnah says, money Rav Meir Mishnah goes to command to Omar. If you try to give her less than what's due her, but based on what the rabbi said, 200 or 100, raise the bill since it's like prostitution. You're not allowed to, Mary, she's not allowed to be mochel. Rashi says, kol zman, that lo yochel loma you're not, kol zman that she still married him. But oda tachta, Rashi said. Rameir, she can't be mochel. Now, let's say he divorces her, and he gives her, and he says, okay, you want the 200? And she says, well, I know you need the money. You can keep the money. Of course, you can always give money back. The Torah doesn't, the rabbis aren't going to say, I want to give somebody money and they want to take money. They accept it. Of course, you can get it back. But while they're married, the rabbi said, according to a mayor, she can't be mochel. That $200 or the $100 for a bula is an obligation. You can't be mochel. You have to, that has to be right. Right. But she could say, yeah, but while they're married, after they're married, when they get divorced, they feel differently than when they're married. But the point is that while they're married, she can't be mochelet, according to a mayor. So a mayor says if there's less of an obligation because she was mochel half of it or a third of it or whatever, no goods. Rabbi Yehuda says, he can write to Psula, he is a star of Masayim Zuz, because 7, she could say, I'm giving you a receipt for half. Even if she didn't get the money, she could be mochel effectively by saying, okay, I'll consider as if I already got half of it. Rabbi Yehuda says you could do that. You could do that. In other words, if she's entitled to 200, Rabbi Yehuda says, you know what? He can give her the ksuba for 200, and she could say, I already got half. Thank you. I got 100 already. Or if it's an almana, and she wants to get 100, she can give him a receipt and say, it's as if I gave you 50. It's as if I already got 50. You could do that. In other words, she could remain in a married state with an obligation of less than the 200/100, according to Rabbi, according to Meir not. Now, our Mishnah says, no, everything is said, even if he didn't write it, she has an obligation for 200 and 100. That's what Mishnah says. If he didn't, you have to have all the nechasim or all his assets or meshubah to that. It's mash from the Mishnah that if you don't have a ksuba standing at all time for 200 or 100, you don't have to be married. You don't have to be married without a ksuba. You have to have a ksuba, an obligation. It always has to be there in effect while they're married, according to a mayor. After they're married, when the marriage is over, if she wants to give him the money back, she could do whatever she wants with the money. She could donate it to the Salvation Army. She could do whatever she wants. But while they're married, you can't be without it. That's what makes it. The Chara Mishnah goes like a mayor, because Yehuda says you could be mochel half of it, even while they're married. Aim a sefer. That's the ratio of the Mishnah. But look at the sefer. The sefer says, she gives him a fee. He obligates a field that's worth only 100 for the ksuba of 200. Below or he didn't write, all my assets are security for this ksuba, chayiv, he still has to do it to T'nai Bezdin. It's a T'nai Bezdin. You have to write that in the ksuba, right? Then the chol goes like a computer, machrayis to sofa. There's a famous machlokas. If a star, you write an IOU and you didn't guarantee it with a mortgage some property to it, is that a mistake? Is that a mistake? It's what we call to sofa. He made a mistake, but it's as if it's in there. It's just a mistake. It's like you don't. If there's a mistake in the typing, you don't say there's no obligation. The obligation's there. It's a mistake. So that goes like a Yehuda, because it says even if you didn't write all my assets or meshubah to you, it's as if it's written in there. Why? Because if it was left out, it was a mistake of the scribe. It should have been written in there. Right. No. So that's what the Mishnah says. Yeah, there has to be collateral there. He has to write in the ksuba that all my assets are act as security for you. If you didn't write it in there, it's a mistake. It's as if it's written in there. So the Chor that goes like computer that says achrayus is a mistake. It's if you left it out, if you left out the guarantee, the mortgage in an IOU, it's a mistake. The Rav Meir says achrayus laptop sofer. You can write a star and not have any collateral in there in a written IOU. Obviously, an oral IOU doesn't have anything in there, but if it's written, it's a mistake. And whether we're talking about a ksuba or a regular IOU, ditzanan, we see this machlokus here. Let's say, here's the case: you find a IOU, a shtar in it, and it's written that the malva says that what's written in the IOU says that the malva says that the loba says I owe the malva. The loba says I owe the malva $1,000. Right now, you find it in the street. What do you do with it? Right? If it's written in there that the loba says I owe you $1,000 and I'm going to guarantee it, I'm mortgaging my house to that. In there. What do you do with the shtar? Now, who do you return it to? Who do you return it to? If the malva dropped it, right? You find the street. Who do you return it to? The malva to collect it. Maybe it was paid. If it was paid, the malva gave it to the loba, and the loba dropped it. Should have torn it up, but he didn't, right? Let's say he wanted to keep it as a receipt. This is what I show you that I paid it. So who do you return it to? The malva, the loba. You don't know who to return it to. If you return it to the malva, maybe the loba paid already. If you return it to the loba, right, that means that it's paid. Maybe he didn't pay it yet, and he shouldn't return it. So what do you do? So it says you shouldn't return it. You shouldn't return it. Shebezin niframim, because Bezin will exact payment based on that. Rashi explains you shouldn't return it to anybody. Even if the loba says I paid it, or the loba says I owe the money. Let's say the loba says I owe the money. If the loba says I owe the money, what's the harm in returning it to the malva, right? Because I still owe the money. I haven't paid it yet. Why? We're afraid that he really paid it to him. And now the loba has property that he sold to Yankel, and now they made a knunya between them. They made a conspiracy between the malva and the loba. They said, listen, I paid you already, but let's pretend that I didn't pay you. You have an IOU. I can't pay you, so you can go and take that property, and we'll split what it's worth. You might some shtick there. So if there's achrayus written in the shtar, and they can go, meaning his field was put as collateral mortgage, and now somebody else has that property because the loba sold to him legitimately. And now they want to make a shtick and go back and take it from the guy who bought it illegitimately. So we're afraid of that. So we say, when you find it, don't return it. Don't return it to malva or the loba, because we don't know what to do. Hold it, give it to the court, don't return it. In the front end. Let's say, though, there is no collateral written in there. And if the loba's moda that if the loba says, I haven't paid it yet, then you can give it to the malva. You can return it to malva. Bezin can't collect with it anyway. They're not going to go after a lokeach. You don't have to worry about some knunya that the malva and the loba, even the loba paid it back already, they're going to try to collect from a lokeach of the loba. You don't have to worry about that. As Rav Meir says, even though there's no achrayus in there, if you say that every shtar that's written, every IOU, there's always collateral in there, and if it wasn't, it's as if it's written in there, so you wouldn't be able to return it either way. And Rav Meir says you're allowed to. If there's no achrayus, if there's no mortgage in the shtar, you're allowed to return it. Chain Bezin can't collect with it anyway from Lokech. Rav Meir. The Chachamim here is Rabbi Yehuda. Rashi points out that the Chacham is Rabbi Yehuda because we always find Machlokes Rav Meir and Rabbi Yehuda because he was in his generation. Rav Meir and Rabbi Yehuda were in the same generation. So whenever you find that Rav Meir says one thing and the Chacham say something else, that's Rabbi Yehuda. And Rabbi Yehuda says, shouldn't return either way. Even if in the IOU it doesn't say my field is mortgaged to you, these and these fields are mortgaged to you, it's as if it's written in there because the achrayus is tos nachas. So therefore, what do you see? The first part of the Mishnah goes like Rav Meir. Which part of the first Mishnah? That says you must always have an outstanding subah for 200, 100, and you can't be right. You always have to have that, even if you didn't write it in there. It's as if it's in there. It's a Tanai Bezin, even if you didn't write the subah. That goes like who? Like Rav Meir says you always have to have one. You can't be mochel half of it while they're married. And the Sefer goes like a Yehuda who says that achrayus is a toh sofer, because it says if you didn't write in there that all my fields are obligated to you, it's as if it's written in there anyway. So what are you going to say? Reish Rav Meir b'Sefer Rav Yehuda? Maybe I'll tell you what the whole thing is like Rav Meir. Revolting like Meir, like the first part of Meir says that you can't be without a full ksuba at all times while they're married, of 200 or 100. Meir, V'shayim Meir ben ksuba l'shtar. Oh, right. I'll tell you what it is. Even though Meir says that achrayis is not a toe sofer, and if you left it out, if you left out achrayis, it's meant to be left out. It's not a mistake. Maybe when it comes to ksuba, it's different. Maybe by ksuba he holds that it is. Yes, normally an IOU, there it's a toe sofer. An IOU, if you write an IOU, write it down. You always put a mortgage in there. Otherwise, what is it worth? I owe you the money. If there's nothing guaranteeing it, it's like an oral IOU. There's nothing writing. It doesn't worth anything. That's by a regular IOU, right? But by a shtar, so b'shayim Rav Meir ben ksuba l'shtar. Regular IOU, he says, fine. If it's written in there, fine. If it's not written there, not. But over here by ksuba, it has to be in there because the rabbis were talking that. Does he make such difference? There are 5 who can only collect from mechura, means free assets. Assets not land or like real estate that's mortgage. Who are the 5? Paris. Let's say a man stole a field. A Goslin stole a field from somebody and he sold it to somebody else, to a lokech. And the lokech worked the field. He fertilized it, he plowed it, he had fruits, he grew fruits. Now later on, the guy who lost the field, who was stolen, the nigzal, the person who the field was stolen from, come and takes his field. When he takes his field, he takes the field as is, with the fruits and with the fertilizer and with everything was plowed up. So what is he going to do now? What is he going to do now, this guy who bought it and lost all that money, who bought it from the Goslin? He's going to go after the person that he bought it from, right? He's going to, the nigzal is going to take all the fruits, but the guy who bought it is going to go after the Goslin, who he bought it from. Not that he's going to go after the Goslin and demand the payment for the fruits and for the fertilizer, all the investment that he made in the field. That he can only collect from the chasam necharim, because we don't know how much it is. The lokeach can't protect himself. He doesn't know how much it's going to be. So therefore, we don't know it's an exact amount. So you can only collect from the chasam necharim. So that's peiros and shvach peiros. Let's say a man gets married and the wife already has children. He's not mechuyev to support them, not his children. But let's say he was makabel himself, he will support her children. As we learned before, you're not even required to support your own children from the age of 6 until 12, right? Until the age of 6 till 12. But under 6, let's say you are. But let's say it's somebody else's children. It's his wife's children. He's makabel. That's also kras mecham, because it's not a clear amount how much that's going to be. The get chov. Get chov means get chov doesn't mean a get isha. Get chov, Rashi points out here, kol shtaros nikron get. A shtar is a get. Even though get usually refers to gerushin, shtar gerushin, 12 lines, gimel tes is gematria 12 and all that. But a get means a shtar. So get chov is an IOU. Get chov she'ein bo achrayis. If it doesn't have achrayis, okay, meaning there's no collateral written in there, there's no guarantee in there, no field is mortgaged in there. Uksubish isha she'ein bo achrayis, and uksubish isha that has no achrayis. All these things can only collect from cash, from movable property. Mansham said who's the one who says lachrayis latov sofer? Because he says get chov she'ein bo achrayis. According to Rabbi Yehuda, there's no such thing as a get chov she'ein bo achrayis. If it's missing, it's a mistake. It's as if it's written in there. Who's the one who says achrayis is not a toe sofer? That's Rav Meir. And he says tani ksubas isha. He says the isha also ein bo achrayis. So you can't say that Rav Meir, the whole mission goes like Rav Meir, and he's motive by ksubas isha, that it is a toe sofer. So what are we going to do with this Mishnah? The first part goes to Rav Meir, the second part goes to Rav Yehuda. So Ibai same Rav Meir, Ibai same Rav Yehuda. It can come out, the whole Mishnah can come out either like Rav Meir or like Rav Yehuda. Ibai same Rav Yehuda. It can go like Rav Yehuda, who holds that what achrayis is a toe sofer, and therefore the end of the Mishnah works out well. The Mishnah says if you didn't put in that all your assets are obligated to this ksuba, it's as if it's written in there because it's a mistake. What about the first part of the Mishnah? Says you must always have an outstanding ksuba of 201, and you can't be mochel. No, that's only if you didn't say anything. The whole Mishnah goes like a mayor, right? In our Mishnah, you're supposed to have if you didn't write in the ksuba, if you didn't give her a ksuba that says 200 or 100, he has to give it to her anyway. It says my best. That's only if she wasn't mochel. But if Rabbi Yehuda says, if she says, okay, it's as if I'm mochel, it's as if I already got half of it. I'm giving you a receipt as if I got half of it, and you could. The Mishnah figured out where she wasn't mochel. Again, the whole Mishnah, over there, where does he say if she was mochel? She says, okay, I'm giving you a receipt. It's as if I already got half of it. then that's okay. And our Mishnah speaking, or she didn't write such a receipt. She didn't write him such She didn't write him such a receipt. She didn't write him such a receipt. Menastam, even if he didn't write her ksubah, it's as if there is a ksubah of 200. You could say the Mishnah goes like Rav Meir holds that achrayas is lav tov sofer, and the first part of the Mishnah works well because you always have to have an outstanding. You always have to have an outstanding ksubah of 200. My chayev the kanim menam churarin, but and the Mishnah says if he didn't write all the assets, all my assets are meshubah to you. Rav Meir says if you didn't write in the ksubah, it's not a tov sofer. You can leave that out. Chayev doesn't mean that you have to pay from the chasim mishabanim. It could just mean chayev that he has to pay. Low cost of he didn't write her all my assets are meshubah to your ksubah. Chayev shoot to my besom, but chayev does not mean from mishabanim. Doesn't mean that doesn't mean you can actually collect from all his assets. It means you have to pay if you have cash. If you have cash or metaltlin, then you have to pay. So if then my chayev the tani menam churarin in a chanami. If it was left out, achrayas is not a tow sofer, and if you left it out of the ksubah that all my assets are meshubah to you, you still have to pay. Doesn't mean you have to pay from all the assets. Just means you have to pay from the chasim mecharim. So the Mishnah come out either like a mayor or like a Yehuda. Okay. Now we said in the Mishnah that if a woman is taken into captivity, he's mechuyev to redeem her. That's part of what's written in the ksubah. Even if he didn't write that in the ksubah, even if he didn't write. If you didn't write in the ksubah that if you're taken into captivity by the goyim, I'm going to redeem you and take you back for a wife. And if he's a Kohen, I'm going to redeem you and take you back, send you back to your family because you can't take her back as a wife. He's still chayiv to do so. So the Mishnah says, the father of Shmuel said as follows: a Jewish woman who was married, who was raped, asur labala. She can't go back to her husband. She was raped. She was taken captivity, and we're not talking about captivity, but she was just raped. Can she marry? Shouldn't she stay with her husband? A Jewish woman, Eishes Yisrael, right? She's supposed to Eishes Yisrael Shenan. So Rav says you can't. You can't marry. You can't go back to Bala. Chayshinan why shemet chilasa ba'onis b'sofa brasa. We don't pass like Abu Shmuel, but he says our concern is she shouldn't go back to her husband. Concern is even though initially the beginning of the rape she was raped, she was forced. Or afraid that at the end of the rape she was pleased. In other words, at the end of the rape she acquiesced and she agreed to the rape at the end. At the beginning it was a rape, at the end it was with consent. And we're afraid if she did it with consent, then she can't marry, she can't go back to her husband. That's what Abu Shmuel says. Eisvei Rab Abu Shmuel. So Rab asks Abu Shmuel, what do you mean? Our own Mishnah says. Mishnah says, Im tish the boy, if you're taken into captivity, I will redeem you, but I'm going to return you for a wife. So what do you mean? You're allowed to take her back. You're not worried that maybe she consented to it. We're not getting into the issue that Tosfos talks back in Daf Dalet about if it's a goy, and we're talking here about a Jewish a rape by a Jewish man. But in any case, that's the kash that he asked from our Mishnah. He says you could take her back. Ishtik. Avur Shmuel didn't answer him. Kari Rav led of Shmuel. So he said, I quote this pasuk: Sarim Asr Milim. The officers of the princes stopped talking. The Kafi Sumpim, they put their hand over their mouth, and that's why didn't he answer? Mayaslim, what could he have answered? Bishvu Yikil, very simple. Even Abu Shmuel says that if a woman was raped, we're concerned that maybe she consented at the end of the bia, she consented to it. That's when you know she was raped. But over here, we don't know if she was raped. We assume she was raped. We assume she was violated because she was taken into captivity by the Goyim. Bishvu Yikil, they were mako because we don't know for sure that what happened. We don't know for sure what happened, right? We don't see that she was nivela. Abu Shmuel is talking about where she was definitely raped. He says a woman that was raped shouldn't go back to her husband because we're concerned that maybe she consented to it. Well, Abu Shmuel, but according to Shmuel's father, who says that if a girl is raped, even a Jewish girl is raped, she can't go back to her husband. Onus is right? You can't do it. Girl was raped. Nothing should be done to her, even if it was a betrothed woman. She was raped. What do you want to do? So what's the pasuk speaking about? Abu Shmuel says if she was raped, you're concerned maybe she consented to the end. Adam say she screamed from beginning to end. And even at the end of the video, she was screaming the whole time. See, that's what the pasuk speaking about. When she was even at the end, she was screaming rape, rape, rape. She clearly didn't consent. Only in that case can she go back to her husband. This that Abu Shmuel says, which is quite a stringent deal. Pliga the Rav, this disagrees with Rav Damarava. If she was raped initially, Besof Baratzon, if at the end, in other words, once she was raped, when she was starting to be raped, even at the end, if she gave up, so to speak, and she consented, Afilu Hiyameres, even if she's so far gone, Afilu, even if she says, let him go, let him be already. Don't, if she's in the middle of being raped and she says, let him be. Even if he wouldn't be raping me, Sachrasa, I would have hired him to do so. No, she's so wiped out by the rape. She's so what you might call that shamed and confused, etc. That she says, "Let him be already. I would have paid him anyway to do it." Muter, she's allowed to. My time, Yetzer al Basham. Her passion got a hold of her, so to speak. He dressed her in passion, and once he started raping her, she was consumed. He plunged her into an incontrollable passion, and it's not her fault once she was raped. In other words, you don't say, "Oh, she probably enjoyed it." You don't say that kind of a thing. She was raped. Rape is rape. Tanik Basarava proof to what Rava says. Pasuk says in the Parsha of Sota. Parsha of Sota talks about a woman who was committed adultery. It says vehi lonis pasuk. That extra word "he" is extra. She wasn't grabbed. She wasn't raped. So in that case, if she wasn't raped, then she's a sota and she's a surah. Ha nispasa, if she was raped, muteris. This one, it depends on if she was raped or not. If she wasn't raped, she's a sota and she's asur. If she was raped, then she's mutter. This one, but there's another one. Even though she wasn't raped, she's still muteris. If at the beginning she was raped, even at the end she consented. It's okay, let him go, let him finish. Let him finish his despicable act. Let him finish. I don't mind. She consents to it? No. That's still considered a rape. You don't say that she wanted it at the end. You don't say. That's what Rava says, and the Brisa says that too. Another Brisa, the more famous Brisa that we have in Sota, if she wasn't grabbed, meaning she did it willingly, then she's also her husband. But if she was raped, she's mutter husband. Because this one, but there's another girl, even though she was raped, she's also, who's that? She's Kohen, as we've learned many times, right? A wife of a Kohen who's raped, she still can't go back to her husband. There's another drush also. This one wasn't grabbed, she wasn't raped, then she's asur, that's a sota. But if she was raped, she's mutter. There's another one, even though she wasn't raped, muteris. Not the drush that we had before. If he was tchilas of yeshlach acheres, before you talked about a girl who at the beginning was raped, but at the end she consented, that's still considered a rape. There's another one that even though she wasn't raped, she's muteris to her husband, even though she committed adultery. Listen to this. A man says, "I'm marrying you on the condition that you pay me $1,000." Okay, they're married for a while. Time goes by. She never paid him the $1,000. Are they married? No, not a kedushin, right? Not kedusha. Pishlonis basim muteris. Va'ezazu shekedusha kedusha tos. The kedushin was a mistake. Shafilu b'no murkav al kseva. Even if her son is on her shoulders, meaning she has a child with the guy, so she can go away. Now, the truth is over here, this is not so simple because we had a klal before that even if the kedushin was based on a condition, but if they went to the chuppah, probably she was mocho the condition. So here you could say that they slept together while there was kedushin. They never had a chuppah yet. Whatever. That's the drush over here. In other words, that if a woman got married on the condition was never fulfilled, but she had a child with this guy, right? She was married. She had bia with this guy, and she committed adultery. The adultery is not adultery. She can go back to us. Why? Because she was considered clean. She was never married. If the condition was never filled, she was never married. So she was never married to the first guy. She committed. If you cannot commit adultery if you're not married. So she wasn't really married. So even if she has a child with the first husband, not married to him, that's another exception to the rule. Amar Yehuda, Hani Nashi the Ganvu Gandhi, women who've been kidnapped by him, they're allowed to go back to their husbands if they are Eishes Yisrael. They're allowed to go back, right? They're allowed to because again they're considered like taken into captivity. They're allowed to go back to us, like we saw in our Mishnah, that if you were taken into captivity, I'm going to redeem you and take you back for a wife. When they're taken in by these kidnappers, when they're taken into captivity, you see sometimes that they help out. They cook for the kidnappers. They give them food. They give them bread. That's machmas here. They're afraid. When the kidnappers are attacked by other bad guys, and there's always wars going on in the world, right? They even supply the arrows. They help them fight back, these girls who were taken captive. Again, machmas yira. But vadai shevkinu v'azli nafshayu. Vadai, if the kidnappers let them go, and they still go back on their own, shevkinu, the kidnappers, okay, you can go home. We had enough of you. And they still go back to the kidnappers on their own. Then vadai asirin, because then they are considered committing adultery, consensual committed adultery, and they can't go back to their husbands. Tan Rabbanan. Again, you could assume that the kidnappers here are Jews, or if you say they're goyim and a rape by goyim also forbids them from the husband, which is pretty much the halacha. For example, we had cases where the wife of a Kohen was raped by some goy. Again, she can't go back to her husband. You don't say that karka olam and all the excuses we had before, that it's not considered. That the goyim are not considered to be human. They are considered, and therefore it's also for the Kohen's wife to take her back. If the Kohen take his wife back. Tan Rabbanan. Shvuya Malchus. What happens if the king? Many times the king would kidnap women and have for the king to have a good time with them. So Shvuya Malchus Harein Kishvuyim. They are like captive girls, and they can go back to their husbands. Genuve Listos, but if they were taken by kidnappers, by robbers, they're not like shvuyin, meaning that arein kashvuyin means they can go back to their husband. Ein kashvuyin means that they're not like you. We assume that it was consensual, and they wanted to be with those people, and they're forbidden their husbands. I Vatanya, if we learn the other way around, that if they were by kidnappers, they probably wanted to. It wasn't consensual. If it's by a king, then it was consensual. So what's going on? So in one case, we say that if they were taken by the king, then it was against their will. If they're taken by the listim, then it's they consented, and therefore they can't go back to the husband. But in the second case, the Brisa other says that if they're taken by the malchus, then what? If they're taken by the malchus, they're not like shvuyin, and they're forbidden. Malchus and malchus lo kasha. So he said, I'll tell you, malchus and malchus lo kasha, kam malchus, malchus achashverosh, malchus ben netzar. If they were taken by Achashverosh, Achashverosh was a super strong king, and they knew the girls who were taken in captivity by them knew that the king's never going to take them for a wife. They only have one, Esther or Malka. Most of them are not going to be taken. If they had a king like Achashverosh, doesn't mean Dafka Achashverosh. It means somebody like Achashverosh who's a powerful king is not going to keep them as a wife. So they don't do it willingly. You can't think, well, maybe I'll be the queen, not so bad. No, they know they're not going to be the queen. So it was against their will, and they can go back to their husbands. Malchus ben Netzer. Ben Netzer wasn't such a king. He was just a little shmendrik who, he took over some cities, etc., and became like he called himself a king. Then they say, oh, maybe I'll be the wife of the king, and maybe I will there. And therefore, they might have been consensual, and therefore they can't go back to their husbands. List is lokasha. So in the first case, we said list them. They're not shvuyin, they're also. And the second case, other lists, we said that they are not also. Haba ben Netzer, haba list them to Alma. If they were ben Netzar. Right, Ben Netzar, who was before we called him a king, now we're calling him like a listim. More will ask about that in a second. If it's Ben Netzar, again, that kind of a kidnapper, maybe they will become his wife, and they're somewhat choshev, and maybe they do it willingly. So if we say that listim, they're also to go back to their husband. But listen, Alma Stam listim, some ruffians, cowboys, whatever, who raped them, who took them into captivity, they wouldn't want to be their wives, and it was definitely against their will. So the Gemara says, Ben Netzar, Hasan Karli Melech, Karli listim. Is he a melech? In either case, we said with Ben Netzar, we're afraid that maybe they did it willingly because they say, oh, I could be a king like this. I might be able to be his wife. Compared to Achashverosh is considered a robber. Gabi listim compared to listim to Alma, compared to regular listim melechu. In other words, there are different classes of people. There's great kings and there's smaller kings. Okay, now we said in the Mishnah that if the man is married to if a man's a Kohen, and he has a wife, he has to write in the Ksuba that if you're taken into captivity, what am I going to do? I'm going to redeem you. And he has no choice. He can't divorce her and relieve his obligation that way. Because, again, like Tosa said, in return for redeeming her, he gets her nechsa miluk. He got her nechsa miluk, he never redeemed her. He has an obligation to redeem her. You can't say, well, it's not like the paycheck with the refuah. They say, well, listen, I took your paycheck and I gave you food. I'm not getting your paycheck anymore. You're laid up, you're sick. So I'm not going to give you food or healing anymore. No, you have to redeem her. But when it's a wife of a Kohen, He can't say, what, I'm going to redeem you and take you back as a wife, but he can say, I'm going to redeem you and take you back, bring you back to the country, bring you back to your family. What about if a Kohen Gadol marries an almana? Kohen Gadol marries a regular girl. He says, okay, I married you. Of course, if you're taken to captivity, I'll redeem you, even though I can't take you back as a wife. A Kohen Gadol who marries an almana, is he allowed to? No. Kohen Gadol cannot marry an almana. However, the Gemara is going to say later on, we're going to have it later on in the next parak, that he still has to give her a ksuba. Yeah, he does. Why? Because the ksuba is to leave. He gives her the ksuba, she takes the money and leaves. We encourage them to leave, right? If a Kohen marries a grusha or a Kohen Gadol marries an almana, we encourage them to leave the marriage, right? So the regular ksuba, she's entitled to take the money and leave. She wants that money to get out. But things that would keep them together, like food and sustenance, maintenance, like that, we don't allow that. That's not part of the ksuba. Some Rabbi Amal Kohen Gadol, does he have to redeem her? Chayav Rafdosa Shani Karba, because I could fill the words of a Kanas of Nelchim Midasa, because he said, listen, if you're taken into captivity, I'm going to redeem you. And what are you going to do when I redeem you? Send you home to your parents, because you can't stay with me. So he says, a Kohen Gadol marries an almana, even though he's not allowed to marry an almana. Yes, it's an alav and a say, and it's not the Isser Kares. You would have to give. If a Kohen today marries a grusha, which happens sometimes, a Kohen marries a grusha. Is it a marriage? It's usher, but of course it's a marriage. He has to give her a get. Same thing. A Kohen Gadol marries an almana. So what about the ksuba? So by Kohen Gadol almana, a ksuba he gives her. Rashi explains. It's not in this parak. Later on in Masechta, not in the next parak. I made a mistake. It's later on at the end of Masechta. Yesh ksuba u'tanai ksuba lemishgal meipakoi, because it's a tanai ksuba which is to take the money and run. In other words, that money he's obligated to give her the money and get out. Tanai ksuba l'meikin kamei, tanai ksuba which would encourage them to stay together. For example, giving her food and giving her fuah, that we say no, she's not entitled to. So over here, Abaya says, you know what? What about the tanai ksuba of redeeming her? Yeah, because the redeeming works, right? Because what does a Kohen's redeeming mean? What does a Kohen write in the ksuba? I'm going to redeem you and send you back to your parents, right? Because you can't take on. That fills in. So Abai says, you know what? So if a Kohen Gadol marries an almana, even though he shouldn't, and he's obligated to divorce her, but if she was taken into captivity, meanwhile, he has to redeem her because he can fill those words. What about a different case? Mamzeros and Nasiyan Yisrael. What about a different law? Yisrael marries a Mamzeros, or a Nasiyan, somebody's not allowed to marry. Does he have to redeem her? Obviously, she's entitled to the ksuba, again, because it's a marriage. He has to give her, even though she has a ksuba. And the ksuba is to take and go, but he doesn't have to get any chayav of dosa. He doesn't have to redeem her. Why? Because what does the Yisrael write in his ksuba about redeeming her? If you're taken into captivity, I'll redeem you and take you back. But he can't take her back. He's not allowed to take her back. So he can't, he's not like, those are bad words. I'm going to take you back for a wife. You shouldn't take her back for a wife. So Abai says, by a Kohen Gadol to almana, where what does a Kohen write in the ksuba? If you're taken captivity, I'll redeem you and send you home to your parents. That he could do. So Kohen Gadol has to redeem his wife from captivity, even though he's not supposed to marry her. But Yisrael marries Mamzeres, doesn't have to redeem her because that part of it doesn't apply. Yes, he read Suba, he has to give her the $200 and divorce her, but he doesn't have to redeem her. Rava disagrees. Rava says in both cases you don't have to. Rava says, Kolshi is a shvuya garim. No, he agrees in the second case from Mamzer Yisrael that he doesn't have to redeem her. But in the case of Kohen Gadol money, he says no. If she's usher because of she was taken to Gavla, Chayav Liftosa. Even by a Kohen marries a girl and he says, if you're taking activity, I'm going to redeem you and send you home, right? Why is he going to send her home and not take her back? Because she was taken into captivity. So if the reason why he's also to marry her, sends her home to her parents is because of she was taken into captivity, then he has to redeem her. Then he has to redeem her. But if the reason he can't take her back is for a different Isra, because he's a Kohen Gadol and she's an Almana, presumably the same thing with the Kohen and a Grusha. Isra Davaracha Garmla and a Chav Das, he doesn't redeem at all. That's so Rav and Abai have this disagreement. Tomorrow's Gemara goes into this discussion about, is this the same as a machlokas? Abai and Rav is the same as the following machlokas. Now tomorrow's daf is on the podcast, and you have to learn tomorrow. It's very important. We've discussed this about the ksubas bin indichrin that encourages the father-in-law to give money, that the boys are entitled, only the boys, not the girls, but the girls are entitled to get maintenance and sustenance until they get married or until they're turned bogeres. That's really the source of tomorrow's daf. You have to learn tomorrow's daf. And last time around, 7.5 years ago, we got to we got to 7 lines from the bottom of tomorrow's daf on Amid Bays. So we'll pick it up from there on Sunday, Rosh Chodesh Mirz Hashem, 7 lines from the bottom. It's in the middle of this discussion about Ksubas Ben different, so make sure you understand that. And on Sunday, we'll pick it up 7 lines from the bottom of Nun Beis Amud Beis on Sunday morning, Mirz Hashem. Shabbat Shalom Lekulam. Have a good Shabbos.
Shabbat Shalom. Have a great Shabbat.